Hello everyone, this is KansaiDorito, and this is the 12th episode of Girls Frontline 2 Explain, where we talk about the girls, their skills, and some of their backgrounds to get you caught up. Today we're going to talk about Tololo, aka AK-Alfa, aka Tololo, Tolol, Wololo, Toledo, Talali, Totino, you get it. Tololo was a returning character from Girls Frontline 1, and as of the first scene anniversary, the most used character in the game, but second in damage. Personality-wise, Tololo is a beer-drinking, stargazing, lone wolfing, sci-fi loving, book-reading dork, and in GFL 1 was a member of Team Grizzly. After the fall of Griffin and Kruger, she's the only T-doll from her team that stayed, becoming more and more isolated as her friends went on to do other things, at least until she joined the Frostfall squad, where she's starting to warm up to her new team and becoming more sure in her decision to stay. Her weapon of choice is the AK-Alfa, of which there's two main versions, one from Israel and a semi-auto civilian one made in the US. Both are based on the most important rifle in the history of the world, the AK-47. But before we can talk about the rifle, we gotta talk about the man behind it, Mikhail Kalashnikov. In 1938, he was conscripted into the Red Army and had a knack for machinery. Because of this, he was assigned to be a tank mechanic and later a tank commander, tinkering and inventing all the while, fulfilling his duties as a soldier until his involvement in the Battle of Bryansk, where he would become wounded and hospitalized for just over a year. He would overhear his fellow soldiers complaining about their service weapons and decide to invent his own, and it would take the form of a submachine gun. Unlucky for him, the Soviets already had a beast of an SMG, the PPSH-41, whose design would go nowhere. But the Soviets liked his skill as a designer, and in 1944 sent him to the Central Scientific Developmental Firing Range for Rifle Firearms of the Chief Artillery Directorate of the Red Army. Not a joke, and start work on an actual rifle. He would take inspiration from the M1 Garand, a top contender for the best rifle in the universe, and create a gas-operated semi-auto carbine, but again would lose. The winner of that competition becoming the SKS. Just in time for the Allies to win the war and start taking everything from Germany that wasn't nailed down. And among the things taken would be a very peculiar rifle, the STG-44. Not quite a rifle and not quite a submachine gun, a man-portable automatic weapon firing an intermediate cartridge, maintaining better accuracy and stopping power at range, and the Soviets were impressed. They wanted something like that for the Red Army, and the new weapons trial began. Once again, Kalashnikov would take aspects of the M1 Garand and incorporated the best features of the STG-44, chambered it in the 7.62x39 of the SKS and RPD, and created something incredible. A weapon that would be cherished and used the world over. The one, the only. The AK-46. But it blew dicks, being very complicated and having serious reliability issues. Kalashnikov's assistant would beg him to redesign it, asking to improve on its lacking reliability. But Mikhail was reluctant. His rifle was good enough, and a fair bit better than his competitors. But with some persistence, he caved. In 1947, the prototype AK-47s were done, giving us that long-stroke gas piston design we all know and love, and its reliability and ease of use, absolutely legendary for the time. In 1948, the trials began, and of course, the AK-1, being adopted in 1949 and receiving its official designation, the Автомат Kalashnikova образца 1947 года. Holy fuck, It would serve for 10 years, and then be replaced by the AKM, a more optimized version of the rifle that was easier to mass produce. Then, it too would be supplanted by another variant, the AK-74, and this is where our timeline diverges. In the 1970s, and honestly even before that, everyone wanted an AK, and despite being over 3 decades old, the fully automatic rifle was just a bit too much for the average civilian. So Izmash, now known as Kalashnikov Concern, or just Kalashnikov, would make a semi-auto version of the AK-74, with a couple other tweaks and name them Saigas after the Antelope. And they were a hit, and Kalashnikov would continue producing them well into the 2000s, and even export them into the US under the Russian Weapons Company. However, in 2014, Russia would invade Ukraine, and then President Barack Hussein Obama would sign an executive order banning all Russian guns from being sold in the US. The Russian Weapons Company would then officially cut their ties to Kalashnikov Concern and take up the name Kalashnikov USA. I know, confusing. Now, while all this is going on, Kalashnikov Israel, which is also not related to Kalashnikov Concern, but is related to Kalashnikov USA, just got permission from the Israeli government to manufacture AKs, ARs, and Galils. And their parent company, CAA Industries, wants to make some competition to the IMI's Galil. So they take a Saiga and do basically nothing to it. Because believe it or not, Kalashnikov USA, Kalashnikov Israel, and CAA as a whole don't make guns. They make gun accessories. So they kinda just add polymer and aluminum bullshit onto the Saigas and call it a day. And Kalashnikov USA's version? Same diff, except they use their own US civilian AKs as a base instead of the Saigas. Despite how stupid I probably made it sound, an AK-Alfa being a Saiga with a furniture revamp didn't hinder its appeal much at all, and its prototypes revealed to some success in 2016, and are still being produced and sold to this day. Being used most notably by the Nigerian Army's Special Forces, who, like Tololo, used the Israeli version. Oh right, Tololo! Let's quickly move on before I continue rambling forever, and get to her skills, cons, and upgrades. So, Tololo's passive is Aurora Curtain, and like a real Aurora Curtain, is something to behold. Firstly, it starts Tololo off with full confectance, which is really important because of the next effect. When Tololo has max confectance after an attack, she gets an entire extra action, letting her move and perform another attack, giving her literally another turn whenever she gets full confectance, which is absolutely fucking busted, and currently is the only character that can do so naturally. Long live the Jackalope. Whenever she starts an action, including her extra one, she gets one random buff until the end of the action for every 2 confectance points she has. Finally, for each time she or an ally deals hydro damage, she gets a stack of Light Spike, a buff that increases her crit rate and crit damage by 3% per stack and stacks up to 8 times, giving her a whopping 24% crit rate and crit damage at max. Her dupes juice her up even further, her C4 giving her 4 buffs whenever she gets an extra action. Those buffs are Targeted Attack Boost 2, a 20% damage increase to targeted damage, Critical Rate Boost 2, a 20% crit rate increase, Phase Boost 2, a 20% phase damage boost, and Piercing 2, a 30% defense ignore for targeted attacks, putting your Tololo on fucking steroids. And with a max stack Light Spike, giving a fucking stupid 44% crit rate. Her C5 makes it even more ridiculous, enhancing Light Spike's effect to 5% per stack for a max of 40% crit rate and crit damage, combining with her C4 and base crit rate for an actually absurd 80% crit rate when fully stacked. And that's just her passive. Now, let's simmer down a bit and talk about her basic attack, Meteor, which despite the name, sucks, and you'll seriously almost never use it unless something forces you to. It's got 8 range and a middling 2 stability damage and does the industry standard 80% of her attack. Alright, moving on. Tololo's first skill is Black Hole Inversion, which deals 3 stability damage, 130% of her attack is hydro damage to one target, and if she exploits a phase weakness, either bullet type or element, she gains 2 points of confectant, getting her a third of the way to an extra turn by itself. Her C1 lets her ignore 15% of cover damage reduction if she exploits a phase weakness, which is nice for general content. Her next skill is very similar. Supernova Impact deals 3 stability damage, physical damage equal to 130% of her attack to one enemy, and if she's got 2 or more buffs, she deals 20% more damage and gets 2 points of confectance as well. Her C2 changes the attack to hydro damage and gives an extra confectance point if she's got 3 or more buffs, which lets Tololo deal exclusively hydro damage if you can keep buffs on her, which is stupid easy. Her ult, Morte Luminia, deals 4 stability damage and 180% of her attack is hydro damage on a 4-turn cooldown. But if she's got 3 or more buffs, she deals 15% increased damage and reduces the cooldown to 2 turns, meaning if you play your cards right, Tololo has absolutely no downtime, and can skill ult to her heart's content, letting her not only stack Light Spike very quickly, but lay down some serious damage while doing so. Her C3 increases the damage dealt by 30% instead of 15 and reduces the skill's cooldown by an extra turn. That last part giving you a bit of flexibility with the rotation, letting you get some extra damage out if you really need it at the cost of slowing down your free action by a turn, which is honestly more useful than it sounds. Like I mentioned earlier, her skills each give 2 confectance points, and as it stands currently, are Tololo's only source of confectance outside of dupes. So to maximize the amount of free turns you get, you want to be absolutely sure you're meeting the requirements for them. For Supernova Impact, it's just gonna happen. Having 2 buffs on anyone is easy as balls to maintain, and Tololo gives them to herself like fucking hotcakes. A tougher one to maintain is Black Hole Inversion, which requires her to exploit a target's weakness. Needless to say, not all enemies are weak to ARs, and even less are weak to Hydro, so if she's by herself, she'd be up shit creek. Lucky for you, you take teams in, and there just so happens to be a very, very well-endowed teammate available to literally everyone. Sabrina. And Sabrina can do a lot for Tololo. She can apply Hydra vulnerability to enemies with her skills, increase Tololo's survivability, rapidly stack Tololo's Light Spike, help Tololo reach her buff quotas, and even draw aggro away from Tololo to let her focus on killing enemies. Personally, I never run them separately, and if you want more info on Sabrina, I've covered her in a previous video. Alright, we've covered her skills, now let's get to her nodes, which are hit or miss if I'm being honest. Comet Tail Transit gives her 1 extra tile of movement when she gets an extra action. Permanently. Now, it doesn't stack or anything, which is honestly kinda weird, but yeah, 5 tiles to 6 past your first turn. I tested it just to be sure I wasn't off my gourd, and I'm pretty certain of it. But I'm also pretty sure it'll probably get fixed or changed at some point, so stay wary. Principles of observational astronomy applies congestion, which completely denies any healing for 2 turns on enemies you hit with black hole inversion, which, while situational, is stupid strong when you need it, and applies it with a skill you're going to use as often as you can anyways. I wouldn't permanently equip it, but keeping it in mind when you do fight someone that heals is the ideal way to use it, so yeah, remember this exists. Invisible Light is pretty cool, giving you attack up 2 and damage up 2, a 15% attack boost and a 20% damage increase respectively whenever you get an extra action, giving you hurt juice right off the jump and every 3 or 4 turns after if you play optimally. If you want to play even more optimally, you'll time your supportive damage boost and defense shreds around it, letting Tololo put out stupid high numbers, especially with her ult. Because of the play potential, I never leave home without this node. Retrograde Motion is interesting. Stunning an enemy for 1 turn if an ally does a support attack when Tololo uses Supernova Impact, which is kinda niche and is definitely more of a PvP focused rune. Really up to you if it's worth it. I personally skip it though. Galactic Cruise cleanses 2 buffs from any enemy you exploit with any of Tololo's attacks, which is honestly nice, especially in Gunsmoke to clear those godforsaken shelter stacks. I run this all the time. Having a double cleanse for doing something you're doing anyways is rad. Stellar Eclipse lets Tololo ignore 10% of an enemy's covered damage reduction if she has full health and stability, which is kind of a rich gets richer node since Tololo tends to get hit if you're sending her in deep like I do, so its uptime isn't always ideal, even with a Suomi since even hits on a shield lower her stability. If you play Tololo a bit more carefully or you don't have problems with getting hit, 10% is decent. If I'm gonna level with you, flanking lets you avoid 100% of cover damage reduction, so what you gonna do, son? Her common key, Afterglow, gives a 5% attack boost and 7% increased damage if the unit doesn't have full confectance, which for Tololo is literally 24/7. This node is honestly great, and can go on a lot of different characters, so I definitely recommend putting in the extra cores to get it. That's all the nodes, let's get to her weapons. So, Tololo's got quite a few options being an AR unit, but some are clearly better than others, and the current worst is the Odds 14, with the lowest base attack in the game, a trait that rarely gets any use and an effect you literally can't use. If you have any other SR, give it to her instead, and if this is all you got, you're broke! The Type 95 is better for sure. With a decently higher base attack, the basically universal AR trait of a free 1-turn buff for having max HP at the start of an action, and an effect that increases her damage by 10 to 20% if she's got any extra movement left over at the start of her turn, which is easy enough to get, especially with her Comet Tail Transit node. The Model Alpha and Robinson Modular Rifle, or XCR, are basically the same, with the same base attack, same trait, and in Tololo's case, the same effect too. Both giving her a 10 to 20% attack boost whenever she gets her extra action, which is common and predictable, but not constant, so it does require a bit of strategy to get the most out of these, which is hilarious because the Model Alpha is her namesake rifle. The best AR again, and probably every time forever, is the QBZ-191, which sacrifices the tiniest bit of base attack for an effect that is literally active every turn. It gives Tololo a 10 to 20% damage boost until the start of the next action whenever she receives a buff, which, under normal circumstances, ends on her extra action. But if you run the Invisible Light node like I told you to, this is literally always active. I know I said it last video, but I'll say it again. Hoard these fucking things. They're super common, great on everyone, and will buy you time while you save up Doritos, not me silly, to get elite weapons. Speaking of elite weapons, none of them are honestly bad on Tololo. Her quirky ability to get extra action synergizes decently with a lot of these guns, but one is very much the weakest here. The Golden Melody. Now, that's not to say the Golden Melody is bad. It's a serious upgrade from any of the SRs by a large margin and requires absolutely no weird playstyle to get the most from it. Its effect just flat out increases damage dealt by 10 to 20%, which is totally awesome on paper, but its second effect increases support attack damage, which Tololo simply cannot do. So unless Tololo is your only built damage dealer, there are better options for this rifle. The Guerno is slightly better, having a lower base damage than the Melody, but having that same 15% attack boost. Its effect increases damage by 5 to 15% for every ally within 5 tiles, attacking 2 to 3 times. And if there's 1 to 3 allies nearby, she gets 2 to 4 tiles of additional movement. While this doesn't really let Tololo roam like she seems to want to do, this thing can put out some seriously nice damage, and is a very serviceable option. Heavy Strings is where we start getting more synergistic, giving a middling base attack, a 25% crit damage boost which Tololo desperately wants, and an effect you can properly take advantage of. Firstly, it has a 20 to 100% chance to cleanse a buff from your target, which at lower calibrations is rare, but at higher ones lets her cleanse up to 3 buffs before an attack if she's got Galactic Cruise, which is more than enough to cleanse off basically anything an enemy might have on them. And, like I mentioned before, can completely cleanse Gunsmoke Dichraf's shelter stacks for your team. For every 3-to-1 tiles she moves, she deals 5 to 10% increased damage, stacking up to twice, which at base requires Tololo to move 6 tiles, which she can't do without Comet Trail Transit. So, you know, food for thought. Finally, it increases damage against enemies not protected by cover by 10 to 20%, giving Tololo more reasons to flank and giving her even more of that juicy crit damage. Finally, we have Planeta, which has the highest base damage of the SSRs, a clean 25% crit damage increase, and an effect that stacks 4 to 5% damage buffs 1 to 3 stacks at a time whenever she gets a kill or ends an extra action, stacking up to 5 to 8 times, for a total boost of 20 to 40%. And if she's at full stacks, she gets 2 to 4 tiles of additional movement after she attacks. Now, if you're fighting trash mobs and killing everything in one shot, this can actually stack pretty quickly, but for boss content and elites, it can really feel like a slog to get all the stacks complete. Which is why you should just give it to Sharkery, bitch! Woo! Look at that fucking damage! The goddamned truth hidden as a joke aside, the Planeta is definitely Tololo's best weapon, and after being asked a million times, I'm gonna show you the imprint bonus. There. You happy now? You wasted everyone's fucking time for a 2.5% damage boost against fucking Elids. Let it be known this is the last time I'm ever gonna mention imprint boosts. It's not worth your time to fret over it, and make such a small difference that it should never affect your choice of weapon. Ever. For attachments, you can go Hydro Boost, which isn't the best early, but becomes the best after V2, and Phase Strike, which is best before V2. As with basically all the DPS characters, you want to attack percent, crit damage, and crit rate, but Tololo really wants crit damage, so if you're lucky enough to get it, try to maximize it. Alright. Let me just take my Planeta back from this harlot and give it back to its rightful owner. There. Alright, that's another video done. Thank you so much for watching, and my returning viewers, thank you guys even more. You guys get me out of bed every morning. Oh, I made a Twitter. I know some of you more savvy people found my personal Twitter and were probably concerned with some of the things you found. Sorry. I honestly didn't think people were going to give a shit about me outside of YouTube, so I kept doing my thing and then just made it private. But don't worry, my new Twitter account is for the channel, so you won't see me pushing my Second Amendment extremism on there, I promise. As I'll continue to say, if I got anything wrong, missed something, or you just want to agree with me that Sharkery is the best girl, leave a comment. I still manage to read every single one, and answer questions where I can. If that doesn't work for you, you could always add me on Discord, or join my server. I've curated probably the best community free of tier list brain possible, and these guys constantly beat me to saying exactly what I was going to say when helping others. Link is in the description, or you could just look up my username, KansaiDorito, and get in touch that way. My Ko-fi is still going strong if you'd like to support me, with my current goal of becoming a millionaire in Congolese franc 2/3 of the way complete. It'll get you a special role on my server, and helps me acquire dolls and weapons to properly test for my upload. Did you like my souped up Tololo? Well, you can thank Full Auto Alchemist, who also gifted the Groza skin from last video. Thanks, man. While cosmetics are just that, getting to see Tololo's butt crack makes my day significantly better. Now, who's next? It's Chongjo and her QBZ 191. After that, it's probably going to be Nemesis, who has a clean lead on everyone else, but you can change that should you want to. And leave a comment on this or any of my other videos to vote for whoever you want. Oh, and one last thing. I wanted to thank That Perv Taco for drawing this Sharkery wife image. It's fucking amazing, and they did it on a whim because I asked for it. And Came In Pool, who's drawn some of the best GFL art I've ever had the pleasure of seeing. In a recent tweet, they said they wanted to make an art series covering the rest of the girls, and I'd fucking love to see Sharkery sooner than later. So go blow up his shit and ask for Shark. Or don't, and ask for your favorite girl. Alright. I just want to apologize again for the longer video, and thank you for sticking it out this far. Hope your Valentine's Day went well, and I also hope you stay strapped. Oh my god.
Beware, we are losing objective easy.
Oh shit, wait. Get fucked. Oh no, he's gonna revive me. No. No.
Nothing like pornography starring men.
Whoa! What?